This conversation about building up your blueprint. It's time to take it because time is wasted. Go grind and chase it, don't lose it.
Hey, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Respect My Blueprint show. I am super excited. This is your main man, your blueprint mastermind. You guys already know who I am. I need no introduction, but as you guys see, I have a fine gentleman here that joined us on the show. Super excited about today's guest. And, I've got Ryan Rigternick on the show with us, and he's the founder of WorkGaze and Leader Ops, two game-changing platforms that help businesses hire smarter, better leaders, as well as helping businesses stop losing talent. Okay, so, Ryan's a fourth-generation business owner and consultant to startups and Fortune-level companies, as well as he's the guy leaders call when their hiring systems are broken. Right. So he's worked with businesses across healthcare, startups, and beyond, giving them the tools to transform their teams, boost engagement, and actually retain the talent they work so hard for. So listen, guys, if you're sick of hearing the phrase, good people are hard to find, okay, or you're struggling to get your team on board with your vision, this episode is definitely for you. So let's go ahead and welcome Ryan to the show. How are you doing today, Ryan?
I am great. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. I'm feeling fantastic. I have the holiday spirit, as you know, it's right around the corner, right?
Yes, it is.
But more or less, I want to go ahead and, everybody, like I said, initially, the audience know who I am. So the audience want to know, well, who's this handsome young guy that's sitting next to you?
Wow.
Who is he, right? So if you don't mind sort of giving us an introduction of yourself, right?
It's getting deep already. Handsome and young right out of the gate.
Yeah.
I
wanted to roll out the red carpet for you, brother, as you can see, okay?
Now, Ryan Rigternick, I'm the founder of WorkGaze and Leader Ops. There is an S in there, just so you go to the right website if you're checking that out. But I'm really here trying to make a dent in the universe on how employers and employees engage and how we create value for one another. So for people trying to navigate their career and create a professional life that's meaningful, how do we help empower practical steps to grow and become who we want to be and what we want to do at a high level? And then from the employer side, how do we help facilitate that growth and that development in a way that's meaningful to each individual? So we're adding different insights and approaches in both hiring as well as people leadership to do that at a whole nother level. So,
wow. So, and that's very, very interesting. So normally you would think people would refer to you as a recruiter or a headhunter, right? Or a human resource specialist, right? So my question is, how did you even get into the field of empowering leaders where it comes to retaining talent?
Yeah, so it's a pretty interesting career journey. I've worked across 4 different industries. I've worked in a number of different capacities from leadership, sales, marketing. I've done a lot of training and people leadership. I've also worked in innovation in healthcare in terms of creating win-win-win strategies, approaches, programs that have created a lot of value for all sides of the table. So how did I get into what I'm doing now? It's a series of events, sort of a perfect storm in my own life, led me into sort of the personal application of this, like who am I? What do I want my life to become? Redesigning my own life around purpose. So that was really the genesis of probably where I really started to look deep into what are the foundations of what brings meaning, what brings purpose, these things that are often talked about in sort of nebulous ways, like how do we practically do that? And so ended up writing a book on that, and then ended up getting connected on the organizational side of this to a company out in Utah and came alongside their leadership in terms of really curious about how can this be done on a corporate level moving an organization from something that's a relatively rules-oriented, hierarchical, not thriving culture to one
Right. Okay.
to one that is like people actually love working at, because call center, right? I don't know anybody who grows up thinking, when I grow up, I want to work
I
in a
want to work
call
in a call center, right? It's like, come on,
yeah, but that was like one of the toughest environments to test some of these things out in. Like, can we create a high level of human thriving in that environment? And absolutely, I'm convinced that it's not about the work; it's about how we approach the work and how we actually use work to better people. And so it's about how do we take the work, understand it not just in the sense of the business outcome that we're looking for, but how can this work actually serve somebody else's purpose of who they want to become and the career that they aspire to move towards.
So it's sort of you work on tapping the potential of the person, right? So because, and it's funny, I mentioned this to, just a lot of my friends and family members, and that's, we all have that soul searching moment as far as defining our true purpose in life, right? And obviously, like you said, most people, I mean, let's be honest, most people hate their jobs, right? They just go simply for the paycheck, right? But
Right.
you really hone in on unlocking, hey, what's your true purpose? What is you really want to accomplish? And I guess that opens the doors for everyone else to be for that particular person, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of talk in the business world about emotional intelligence and whatnot, right?
Right.
I like to think about personal purpose in the framework of kind of three buckets: who somebody is by design, who they are by experience, and who they want to be by intention. And if we can get some information about ourselves in those contexts, then it gives us a lot more tools to partner with intentionality versus sort of wandering aimlessly. So.
Which I have a question, because I had a previous guest on the show about a couple weeks ago, and he was a business strategist, right? Help businesses scale from one level to the next. And one thing he mentioned, how a lot of people fall victim to, is particularly entrepreneurs, that he called it the shiny red ball syndrome.
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. Where the new
Shiny
toy comes
object.
in the toy box and you just ultimately lose focus and things like that. So,
100%.
how do you help people align their vision and not fall into the shiny red ball syndrome?
It's a great question. So one of the paradigm shifts that I like to introduce and talk about is, instead of what is normally done now, which is how do we get the people to align to the organizational vision, is how do we understand, and I think it's much more powerful, it is more powerful, is how do we understand the vision of the individual and the organization, and how those two things can actually intersect and serve. And so once that's in place and there's actually points of synergy and alignment in that, then from then it's a matter of how do we create a plan that aligns to that, that's meaningful to both the organization and the individual, and how do we create the rhythms and the habits to revisit this in a light fashion over time that keeps everything progressing and momentum sustained in a very intentional, structured way that is still flexible, it's still personable, it's actually more authentic, but it's about how do we add these insights and then create habits out of those that are like the micro touches that become meaningful beyond just the work. Instead of I need you to do A, B, and C, let's also talk about, what are you working on? What skill are you working on? Well, how can I support that? Is there any strategic work that we can add in to that would help facilitate what you're trying to achieve? So it's creating those habits that then create a collective impact, both in the culture and in the sense of energy and momentum that happens. Like, we sense it, but the challenge is not just how do we sense what different environments are at, but what's our ability to actually shift and sustain those environments.
The consistency. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
right. You're right.
absolutely.
Which Now that leads to this, to this point I want to make, because correct me if I'm wrong, since the pandemic, since the introduction of virtual work and everything like that, the workforce has been largely working virtually and everything
Mhm.
like that. And now you see companies and big institutions, they're struggling to get their workforce back into the office and everything like that. So, you know, how has which my question to you is, how difficult it has been since the pandemic to be able to have individuals enthusiastic about going back to work again, especially going back in the office.
Yeah. So my view on that is maybe a little off topic, but it's not. It's so
Uh-huh.
I view like when you go virtual, especially if you're a company that's gone from in the office to remote, that shift is an amplifier of the culture that was already there.
Right.
So if that's a healthy culture, you've now got an amplified culture and an increased benefit. If you had a broken foundation and cracks in the culture and maybe some deficiencies there, again, it's an amplifier. So you go remote, you've actually probably got more dysfunction and more things that are going wrong. And so I don't think it's a one size fits all for what the effect of either return to office or going remote. It's the amplifier effect of what actually are the foundations of how you're leading your people. Is there engagement there to begin with? Is that managing people from the outside in or from the inside out? And so, it's an amplifier of really leadership style and culture that's currently in place.
Right. So the culture that was already in place obviously plays a big part into it, right? Because like you say,
Absolutely.
it's amplifying of what was already there. Okay. So, and okay, which I get it. And it's funny because you have, you know, people on the opposite side, right? Like, Reed Hastings of Netflix. He was very that, okay, he doesn't mind, working from home. There's able to make it work. Where versus Elon Musk, he's more obviously, no, everybody come back to the office, and Jamie Dimon, no, come back to the office to be able to work and everything like that.
Yeah.
So, so a big part of it obviously is the culture. So let me ask you, do you more for now, because I know you work on leadership as well as you
Mhm.
work as far as helping to retain talent. So when you go and make your assessment, what's more of your primary focus? Is it more of the C-suite executives and the founder and the CEO, or is it more of the workforce and getting them to empower themselves?
So I can go in and engage at any level, but what I've found is that if senior leadership hasn't bought in to the paradigm shifts and the changes,
Right.
then the effort is really, it can be in vain, because you end up creating a microculture that there's not alignment through senior leadership. And so you actually at that point can introduce actually division in the company, where you've got two different cultures and a power struggle of which one, and
They're colliding.
they're colliding, and the and what is going to win out is whatever senior leadership buys into. So I pretty much work with senior leadership, but then down throughout the organization as an outflow of that. So.
Okay. Can you give us an example of a company that you was able to go into and make a dramatic change, or something like a company that was basically from A and you took them to scaling to the next level?
Yeah, so we had probably a good example of this was a company that had actually lost one of their key senior leaders, and they were not prepared for it. It took them off guard, and so we came in and did an assessment and went through the leadership touch point of employee experience. And they were a younger company, and so they had a lot of structures to still be put in place. And they ended up actually attracting that senior leader back
Really?
based on the fact that this whole idea that work can be used to accelerate somebody towards the future that they want to have. Reapproaching the exact same relationship with that individual, but from a different standpoint of the value that could be created through the work, actually attracted that key person back. To my knowledge, they're still there, and they're in the process of building this out throughout their organization. And so it's not only, in this case, an insulator from losing people, but I've actually seen it attract people back based on, I mean, you think about it, it's not just asking somebody to come back and do a bunch of tasks.
Right.
It's I like to call employees middle customers, right? We have all this frame of thought around how we want to show up and serve our end customers, but our middle customers, our employees, are the ones that create the value that in turn is delivered to the end customers. And so taking some of those same applications, approaches, and mindsets towards employees, and how do we create more value for our employees that goes beyond the paycheck, can dramatically change an organization. So,
right, which I agree, because we've heard certain cultures, like these tech companies, they do the what's some of the catered lunch, the catered food, and the dry cleaning, and the yoga classes, and everything like that. So
right.
would you recommend a company going that extreme, or is it more of value driven?
I think so what I like to encourage is that value is highly personalized. And so if we can understand what each person values and what's meaningful to an individual in a scalable fashion, so that's part of the insights that we're helping bring, is like that can be viewed as an entirely second job being added onto leadership of all the other operations, right? But with the right insights, at our fingertips, those become highly accessible and easy to apply. And so I would say value is ultimately created between two parties, and it depends on those two parties in terms of the value. So
it has to be mutually beneficial, in other words, right?
And to what degree, right?
Makes sense.
To some person, being able to have flex time for a family schedule is more valuable than another couple grand in terms of a raise, right? So it's people value different things, and join and leave companies for different reasons. And so if we can understand how to create value with each person that we want to attract and retain, we're positioned to do that at a higher level.
And I agree with you, Ryan, because I tell this, you may have heard this cliche, right? People don't remember what you say or what you do, is how you make them feel, right? So
yeah,
a lot of people, well, I wouldn't say a lot, but there are people out there where the monetary value is not the number one priority. It's sometimes, some people would like acknowledgement. Some people would like, to be able to have the ability to rise up the ladder and everything like that. So in your professional opinion, how often is monetary value is the key metric?
It's a highly contextualized question. It very much depends on the person and the context.
Right.
And so these things, I'll say this: I know of several cases where people have taken a pay cut to get into a culture that they will thrive. Sometimes people will take a lateral, even a slight down, to do a career change into something else that they're more interested in. Right. So it very much depends on the person and where they're at in their journey. And oh, by the way, it's not the same thing for the same person at different points in time, right? These things change over time.
Right. As the person evolving, obviously predicated upon their lifestyle, they have a family, right. If they're a bachelor, if they're living in a certain area and things of that nature. So yeah, that's pretty much factored in a lot too. Okay. So
aspirations, like if we understand somebody's aspirations, whatever those are, right, we can reverse engineer those into a powerful employee value prop.
Okay. Now I want to shift into the leadership, right? And again, this is very funny because a lot of what we're discussing was part of my previous conversation. And you give the example like Steve Ballmer, right? Which I'm not sure if you know, he's the owner of the Los Angeles Clippers,
Mm,
and he end up was Bill Gates number two. Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft, he ended up being he's like the I forgot his official title, whether it's CEO or president, whatever the case may be, but is what you will label as an intrapreneur, somebody who takes ownership of their job within the organization they're in, because most people aren't
mhm.
just made to be the entrepreneur, right? They're not being made
Absolutely.
the founder. And you have other examples, like you've had the Steve Jobs, and Wozniak, he was the entrepreneur. So I'm assuming when you educate and where you teach about leadership, how much do you teach individuals on it's okay to become an entrepreneur of an organization and be an entrepreneur of themselves?
I highly encourage it.
Right.
I I think there's one of the values of de-risking what you're doing is to build the transferable skills and in an environment that you're being compensated to do that in. So I've done entrepreneurship, I've done extrapreneurship and entrepreneurship, right? It's like I think those are transferable skills. And so
Right.
I've innovated on behalf of companies, and I've innovated on behalf of my own business entity, and it's the same skill in both places. So if that's something you want to do, I highly encourage people to do that in somebody else's company before they venture, because all of those things will why not develop and hone a skill before you're bearing the full measure of risk for it, right?
Right, right. And I like how you started off that sentence by de-risking, right? Because that's the biggest obstacle I think a lot of, entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs face, and they can't overcome, is that fear. Just being able to take that risk, and that's the greatest. I mean, I guess that's the greatest quality of any entrepreneur, right? Is saying, hey, okay, I'm going to take the risk, versus where individuals are sometimes scared. That's just how, that's just something that's within them. So, okay. Well,
Well,
now,
so entrepreneurs are a little bit a little bit different than the rest of the general population, right?
right, they're
They're
cut from a different breed, right?
yeah. There are. I've had to fight this in myself, where there's an attractiveness to risk, like just
Wow, I like
risk,
that. Okay, yeah, okay.
right? So actually taking de-risking, being intentional to de-risk, is something that some entrepreneurs need assistance with, because there's a certain appeal to the risk. There's an adrenaline rush and
Right, it's a high, yes.
a dopamine hit. Yeah, absolutely. Right. So it's yeah. So there's two sides to that: the being afraid of risk, but then how do we engage with risk in a way that has wisdom and safeguards, and how do we de-risk it to hopefully make it successful, not only in the short term but the long run. And so yeah, there's a lot of things that can be done in that way to, you don't have to necessarily quit your job to launch something, right?
True.
You can do entrepreneurship, then you can do two things in parallel, and slowly morph over into your own thing should it take off. Is definitely a proven pathway on that. So
Awesome, awesome. Which that leads me to the next question. There's been a lot of revolutionary, in life, there's been a lot of things that's been revolutionary, right? One has been, there was the industrial age where, that causes the America to be what it is right now. Then there was the introduction of the internet, which warp speed everything again, right? Now we have like the introduction of AI, artificial intelligence, and everything like that, which now is going to just put us on a whole nother level in the 5 to 10 years or so. So what are your thoughts into just the rapid involvement of business and all of the introduction of everything, particularly when it comes to AI?
So I read an article that I think gave a really great analogy of AI. I forget who wrote it, or I would mention it, but they were equating AI to being like electricity, that it's going to be in everything. It's just a matter of time and who does it the quickest. It's a horizontal change, a horizontal introduction that's absolutely shifting everything. And so it's also going to shift the role of work. So I think AI is replacing a lot of specialist type approaches that can be done in a progressionary fashion, sequenced and accomplished. And so I think it's going to bring. My prediction is AI. If we want to skate to where the puck is as an employee, to be able to be a generalist and engage with different systems that are augmenting your work, as well as high change skills to be able to manage multiple things at one time. I think those are skill sets of the now and even becoming more important in the future. So I think the change is just starting. So
I mean, because a lot of people are afraid that. We're not afraid. Is the writing's on the wall that AI is going to replace a lot of these mundane jobs, right? A lot of jobs is just gonna. Companies are going to be more efficient by just having AI or robot handling it. So, in your opinion, you're saying those people who think, or maybe the prospects of their jobs being threatened, to leverage into a more diverse set of skills. Don't be generalized. Kind of expand your skill set a little bit. Is that the answer you give there?
Yes and no. So I think actually there's a level of being a generalist that actually will be more valuable because AI is augmenting specialty skills and introducing that. So the ability to change contexts and perform across multiple areas with the assistance of AI, I think is actually going to be quite valuable. If so right now, if you're in sales, you're probably engaging with a number of different platforms of AI, and you're managing multiple systems, right? And so the ability to understand all these different AI enabled capacities that can make you more effective in your job makes you more valuable in terms of your work product. But in order to do that, you've got to become almost more of a generalist and use the technology as a portfolio of specialists, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. And I'm gonna give you an example because I like how you framed that, and it's funny because I just was mentioning that to my team, right? I'm in personal finance where we teach on credit literacy and help people repair their credit and get funding. So I have a few virtual agents and we have a community. Sometimes the questions that our community members and clients ask maybe a little too complex for our virtual agent to understand. So I basically tell them, listen, use AI, right? Use ChatGPT to help frame and answer a reply for you, right? So, and it goes to the point you just said. So it's, a salesman, they could use different AI platforms, whether it's, like a Sana or Notion or organizing tasks or something that it just help them become more of a superhuman on their job, in other words. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's the automation piece, and then using AI as a thought pattern or as a thought partner, and actually putting a leadership hat on. It's AI is as good as the person who's prompting and using it, and so it's the administration and understanding how to use it to its potential is part art and part science. So, and we're all learning that. So.
Okay, sorry about that. So my next question is how now this of course this is I already know the answer, but I want to build some context for our conversation here. So how important is culture when it comes to an organization? Do you put it in the hierarchy of 1, 2, 3? which I know revenue has got to be within the 1, 2, 3, right? Making money for the company, or there is no company. But in 1, 2, 3, where would you place culture?
What are the other three?
That is okay. If we were to put revenue, so I would say, let's say sales, right?
Yep.
Culture, number 1 out of the 3, and the third we would put the third, let's revenue, say sales, culture. I guess the third could probably put customer service.
Yeah. Well, culture is one of those things that affects everything, right? So it's culture. Like, you can't just think about culture as like its standalone thing that we check a box over here, right? Culture is not siloed. Culture is like the recipe of how all of these things work. It's paramount to how it's the unwritten rules of how things are done, beyond what's written on paper, but how people approach everything from leadership to customer service to innovation to how do we sell people, that there's a culture around selling, what's acceptable, what's not.
That is true. You're right.
And then how do we create value in all of these things? I think culture is the unwritten rules of how we engage with each other, with our customers, and ultimately how we create value for each other. And that affects absolutely everything.
Okay. Even sales then. So it's almost safe to say that's number 1 then.
If you're asking me what affects everything, culture affects everything. But leadership affects culture. So
that's a good one, right? So yeah, I guess I should have put that within the first 3. Okay, but I guess the audience definitely can discern as far as, okay, what is truly important. When it comes to starting out, you want to make sure you have the proper leadership and culture in place, as they pretty much goes hand in hand there. Okay.
Well, the harsh reality is, as a leader, my organization is a reflection of the culture that I've created in it. And so if I'm a leader and I don't like the culture of my organization, then the maybe disorienting reality in that is that I actually need to look in the mirror at what I'm producing. Right. That's true.
And I'm assuming that's one of your expertise, is to take that person and turn them to that mirror and take a look at themselves, right?
Yes, it's humbling, not only to them but to me, because I have to walk that out. All right, we're none of us are exempt from that. So
of course, and now, which brings me to another point. What is your usual advice? Because there's what's also the cliche, hire slow, fire quick. And one of my mentors says that, and I want to get your opinion. How true is that cliche there, or that saying there?
I think an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure on that.
Oh, I like that. Okay.
Yeah. So I think that I think investing more on the front end of hiring is usually what makes sense to most companies. Because the cost, one of the things that I encourage companies and give them the tools to do before we even do an engagement is to evaluate the cost of their turnover. So employee turnover costs are oftentimes embedded across multiple budgets and silos in an organization. And when those dollars and cents are actually quantified, it's usually higher than what most companies realize. And so understanding the cost of employee turnover and the sunk cost of somebody that doesn't work out, it puts it in proper perspective of hiring slower, greater intention, greater data, so that we get the right people in the right seats. Yeah, I think that's hugely important.
And you're right, because a lot of how do you quantify that, right? Because if you're not taking the proper steps at the beginning, and you have this person, next thing you know, that fire could reverberate down the chain, all the way down, and you don't even know that, right? And
Yeah.
the cost of hiring again, retraining, some of the intangibles of the time, the energy that it takes is very hard to quantify, which you right, which I agree with you. And so let me ask you one final question. How do you train leaders and human resource departments to be able to hire better or retain staff better?
Yeah. So the first is to quantify the data in terms of what they're looking for and the value that can be created in the particular role. So really zeroing in not only on the persona, but looking at the persona of the role of who would thrive in this and who does this role actually serve in terms of their career at a high level. So looking at the role, not just through the lens of qualifications for what we need today, but who is somebody that in this role we could engage with, that we can actually create a shared future with. It's a different way of looking at, just instead of just qualifications and a job description, how do we look at this position and who our ideal candidate is, not just for today, but in creating shared value into the future. So that's the thing I like to help to zero in on, because it changes the conversation around just qualifications and who's the right fit. And even if somebody fits all of our qualifications, are they the right, are they the best candidate? I think oftentimes we exclude some of our best candidates because they don't check 100% of the qualifications boxes, but that padding of maybe the 10 to 15% of qualifications they don't match, as long as the essentials are there, that actually might be somebody who has great growth potential and a better long-term value creation in that role than somebody who meets all of the qualifications and is only coming for a bump in pay.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes it's not always on black and white and paper where, like you said, say, oh, this, make sure this person does this, and this. But like you said, you could find somebody that maybe they don't 10, 15%, they miss on the qualifications, but hey, they bring a longer term value. So, okay, I completely agree. Which now, of course, you're the founder of two amazing platforms, WorkGaze and Leader Ops. So WorkGaze, I know that's more of the human resources, empowering, founders and departments to be able to retain talent. So if you could share Leader Ops, if what is that platform and how'd you come into starting that platform?
Yeah, Leaders Ops, it's plural, just in case
Leaders
you're
Ops,
looking
I'm
for
sorry.
Leaders Ops. Yeah, no worries. That happens all the time. Leaders Ops is really what I do, coaching, training, and speaking through. And so it's really how I engage with reinventing employee experience across the full employee life cycle. So how do we map out not only the leadership paradigm shifts, but how do we practically apply that to every area of the employee life cycle, starting with recruiting, but right on through? And how do we add in those touch points that really cumulatively change the employee experience, that get them to lean in instead of just doing a task, but lean into the value that's in it for them and the company? And how do we create the rhythms throughout that cause people to show up in ways that they wouldn't otherwise? So.
Right. Okay. One final question. I'm dying to hear that, because you're a young man. Just I'm gonna say it again, right? So you've been on both ends of the spectrums where people would look for a job. There was the classified ads in the newspaper. You would have to actually go on a classified, call the job, and go to the destination, with your tie, or if you were as a young lady, a nice dress, and apply for the job. Now there's Indeed, right? And ZipRecruiter, right? And where you submit a resume or you answer some questions online. And sometimes 9 times out of 10, the interview is virtually. You don't even go into the job until you're physically hired and everything. So this is a big shift in paradigm. Which one do you like more?
So we are actually trying to introduce the insights, both directions, the insights that are actually missing from some of those older versions into the new, because the virtual, as great and convenient as it is, there is a loss of understanding the human elements, the team, the culture, all of that sort of stuff, which have a huge impact on whether or not somebody genuinely wants to continue working there. I think the stat I heard is 40 or 44% of people regret their starting with a company in the first 30 days.
That's almost half.
Yeah, almost half. Almost half.
Wow. And obviously a big, you could attribute that a lot to because of the current way as far as recruiting is, because the introduction of Indeed, ZipRecruiter, and everything like that, right? So yeah.
Well, with the easy apply button, it's made it more convenient for job seekers to apply, but it's made it so it's flooded inboxes and ATS systems that how do we find the actual best candidate within this stack of resumes and digital profiles, which it creates its own challenges, and that's what we're trying to help sort out the value beyond the resume within that, so that people can get noticed who are a really genuine good fit, and likewise recruiters and hiring managers can engage with the right people versus 100 people that just clicked a button. So
exactly, yeah. And wow, that's I'm going to keep that in mind. 44%. Wow. I mean, obviously we hoping those numbers are able to go down the way, the future is going, in introduction of a lot of things here in technology. So, all right. As we're ready to wrap up, there is one final question that I want to ask you for the audience. If there's one secret, one recipe, or one blueprint that you would share with entrepreneurs out there when it comes to retaining talent, attracting talent, or hiring talent, what is the one secret you would share with them?
Understand what makes your people tick. Everybody is different. Everybody's coming at something with a little different lens, a little different context. And so understanding how they view it and why, not only what matters to them, but why, goes a long way in being less transactional and more relational.
Absolutely. So I think there's it's not the Stephen Covey book. It's a book where
How to win friends and influence people.
There you go. Yes, where it really helps you hone in on the why, right? And like you said, the purpose is what really, really matters a lot to a lot of people, and I could attribute to that, because even in my career, it's beyond the money. The money is just a byproduct,
That's right.
And I usually tell people, do what you're passionate about to the point where you would even do it for free.
That's right.
So Ryan, thank you for coming to the show. Before we 2025 is right around the corner. I know it's a big year for a lot of people. Is there anything that you got up and coming, any speaking engagements, shows, any products or services that's being released that the audience can check out?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are actually releasing WorkGaze for job seekers and moving into private beta for employers and staffing companies. So we would love to work with job seekers to help them build their career and find jobs that accelerate that. And on the flip side, any staffing companies or employers that want to recruit with insights and data for not just hiring for qualifications, but hiring for engagement and retention, we would love to partner with them. So.
Awesome. And where's the best place to find? I found you on LinkedIn. Obviously, that's obviously the best place based on your field and expertise to reach you. But is LinkedIn the best platform, or is there any other platforms audience can reach you at?
Yeah, LinkedIn is great. You can also reach me through workgaze.com.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Well, Ryan, thanks you for joining the show. This has been a great interview. You've helped a lot of, because our audience are aspiring or new entrepreneurs, and you've given them a lot of blueprint when it comes to, like you said, just retaining talent, attracting talent, and more importantly, tapping into their inner leadership as well too, which, is intangible that I think a lot of people overlook and is necessary in the entrepreneurship journey. So
yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me on. I enjoyed the conversation very much. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, and listen, guys, thanks for tuning into the Respect My Blueprint show. You could definitely check out episodes again every Tuesday and Friday. Definitely check out the link down below. If you joined this episode, we're going to have Ryan's LinkedIn on the description notes, as well as links to WorkGaze and Leader Ops as well too. So you definitely want to give him a follow, support him as we're going into 2025. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for tapping in, guys. And as always, see you on the flip side. Take care, guys. Peace.
This conversation about building up your blueprint. It's time to take it, cause time is wasted. Go grind and chase it, don't lose it. This generation need integration with information to move with. An inclination that is abiding and entertaining improvement. Yep, let's Paul with Blueprint. This guests are exclusive. Get on and tune in and then learn some new tips about credit, finance, investment. A nice chance to get rich and buy land. Flip it, quick 9 bands. Learn all the skills from Wes, he did it. Learn how to build successful business. Run up a mill and get the digits. Run up a mill. Look, safe place where guests are speaking. Based off financial freedom. All facts, no cap, believe it. Podcast, you have to see it.